You're listening to Reckless Creatives, a Pipeline Artists original podcast where Sadie, Dean, and Jeanne Bowerman share the candid truth about the challenges and benefits of living life as artists. Okay, Sadie, Dean.
Jeannie.
I just have to tell you that just as we got on the Zoom to do our little intro, my phone started to go off.
Uh-oh.
A funeral director calling. So I'm sure there's a burial that's going to happen at my cemetery that I have to attend to when we get off here. But this is reckless.
So what does that entail for you? Like, you get the call, you go over there. What are you doing?
They usually call me when they say someone passed and we'd like to arrange for the burial and the grave digging and blah, blah, blah. So then if it's a full burial, then I have to call the grave digger. Yes, I have a grave digger in my contact list. And if it's a cremation, then the dude who runs the cemetery with me usually just goes and digs the hole.
Okay.
And I don't know, did I tell you when I was at Thriller Fest and people found out that I run a cemetery? All these writers went rushing over to me like, oh, tell me what that's like. Like they want plot points for their stories.
Literal plot points.
Ba-dum-bum. Yeah. All that aside, because Claire Mundell deserves our full attention.
Yes. 100%.
Okay, first of all, oh my God, I love her.
Yeah. I know.
Right? I wouldn't shut up. I love her. I just love the idea of a woman starting a production company and taking on that task of finding incredible IP to adapt when there's thousands and thousands and millions of books out there, and really fighting for those passionate projects and bringing authors' words and stories to the screen, especially the Tattooist of Auschwitz.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Remarkable show. I don't recommend binging it all at once because it's so heavy, but you need to binge it. There's just no way around it. It's just such a beautiful show. And the team that she brought on for that to visually portray all of that and translate that book to what it is, it's remarkable. And just the extended creatives that came on board, like Barbra Streisand, who wrote an original song. She's never done that in the history of her career for a TV show. So this show speaks volumes that it's very touching. And Claire is just a gem, an absolute treasure. And it was so cool chatting with her again.
And you guys are going to glean some insights into what kind of stuff she looks for, like what makes a project stand out. And, you know, we dove deep into a lot of different kind of stuff, not just let's talk about the show. Like it was, you know, but let's talk about the show. I watched, there were only 6 episodes. I watched 2 episodes each night. I probably could have kept binging. Like I could have sat there all day and watched the whole thing. The acting is incredible. But what I want to bring forth is a lot of people say, oh, there's been so many movies about the Holocaust and all of that. This was what I loved and appreciated about this, was that this was kind of different perspective. You know, not just that it's Lolly's perspective, but that it's sort of like the birth of the concentration camp, like the first wave of people who went and how they raised their hand to go, like as the one person from their family, because they had no idea what they were going into. They thought it was just a work camp. You learn about it as Lolly learns about it. Like you see it all through his eyes as the onion layers unpeel, and he finally realizes, where am I?
Right.
And also too, what I thought was interesting too, is like showing the perspective of the Jewish people who were employed by the SS. And people would say, why would you do such a thing?
Right.
But you do it to survive. Like you don't know what you're willing to do to survive. So no judgment. really powerful and beautifully done.
It's so good.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very well done. Yeah, and this conversation with Claire was really cool, and just learning about her company, Synchronicity Films, and what they do, and all the projects that she has coming up for all the the books she's been reading on her poor iPad. That's I'm sure
Hmm.
to the brim. Um, but yeah, it's just really cool to hear her perspective as a producer, taking all that on and keeping that flame alive to carry these through that, take years to even realize. It's really cool. Super, super motivated after chatting with her. Like, I should be doing more.
I know. She's incredible. And so we will link to her bio so you can read more about her because there's so much to know. And you are also going to love her accent. At least I did. So let's just get the show on the road. And here's Claire Mundell. Well, welcome to Reckless Creatives.
Thank
We
you.
are very excited to have you. I understand you already spoke with Sadie.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a lovely conversation, didn't we, a while back, Sadie?
Yeah, we did. It feels like 20 years ago, but it was really like 2 weeks ago.
I know, because you guys, I take it you've been really busy with Emmy, all the
Yeah,
Emmy stuff. Yeah.
I got really slammed with it, which is great, post strike and everything. But you're just like, oh my God, I want to talk to everyone, but there's literally no time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you need to come to a cottage in the Highlands and take a vow of silence then, or something like that.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
How would that work with our podcast, taking a vow of silence?
Yeah, that could be tricky. That
Could be a little tricky.
It's been so busy. I mean, it's been busy enough for me, so God only knows what it was like for you guys. You must have woken up every day and just thought, who am I speaking to, now? And who did I speak to yesterday and 5 minutes ago? And
Yeah, I definitely I get asked a lot, what are your favorite shows? What are you watching right now? And I don't know. It's like I don't know. Everything's great. I'm
well,
sure.
you do know, Sadie. You do. It's the Tattooist of Auschwitz.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
There you
absolutely.
go.
Yeah. That's the
And
only
Anyway,
one.
what can I do for you? Ask me anything. I'll try and be entertaining and insightful if I can.
we try that all the time. It doesn't always work, but we make an effort. My husband and I just finished watching it, and
Oh.
we are very drawn to war shows and all of those kinds of topics. Like, I don't know what's wrong with us that we like persecution and like torture and all of that. But this was so beautifully done. But before we get into that, I am very curious as a producer, what makes a project stand out for you? What makes you say, this is, I know you like to adapt a lot of IP. Like, what makes this piece of IP the one?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's one of those questions that if we all had a really definitive answer to, we could bottle it and sell it, for lots of money. I think it's inevitably about something in your gut that kicks in when you read a piece of work or you listen to an interview on a radio, you read an article in a magazine. And I don't know, like somehow something in the truth of what that person is saying, whether it's encapsulated in a piece of fiction or it's encapsulated in in a testimony or a true story from someone, something in the truth of it somehow connects with you. I think that's how it is for me, certainly. I mean, I get a kind of physical reaction when I find something that I think is intriguing and interesting, because, there are limitless stories out there, and it is really, it's such a perilous endeavor. Obviously not as perilous as lots of other jobs you could do, but metaphorically speaking, when you pick a project to develop, you are committing an unspecified amount of time in your life to it, and you are committing to another person, maybe more than one person. You are giving them the hope that you can make their dreams come true, which is often about making their adaptation of a book come to the screen, or, whatever form it might take. And so it's a big responsibility, actually. And I realise that as producers, we're sort of vessels of everyone's hopes and expectations, and yet producing something and making it come into form, so many factors are out with our control in that process. And so the only thing, I guess, that is in your control is your response to the work. And if you have such a strong response to the work instinctively, initially, I think for me, at least, I know sort of deep down that I can go into a room and I can begin the process of getting other people excited and inspired by this. Because I think what we do when we tell stories and we make stories, it's a communication, isn't it, of excitement and inspiration from one person to another person to another person. And if you don't feel that urge right at the beginning, then you will find it really difficult to get something, even more difficult to get something away than it already is. I think very often, like as a producer, I come across, books, and they make sense in a kind of commercial way, they make sense in a industrial way, like, oh, we could shoot this in this way and we could shoot it in this place. But there's no question that there is this initial spark, and it has to catch your imagination and your gut in that way. That's what happened for me when I read The Cry, which is a series we made for the BBC. I read the book at manuscript stage, and I read it in one afternoon, and I just knew right away that I was prepared to take the risk to adapt this. Because, as I say, you never know at the beginning of the process, is this going to be something that you spend certainly a minimum of 2 years, and anywhere north of that, 4, 5, 6 in the case of the Tattooist. And are you going to be able to sustain your passion for it through that time? Does it make sense to commit your time to that endeavour? And I suppose as you get older and you get more experienced, you begin to think about, from experience, how long these things take, and therefore you have to think really carefully about how many different, lanterns you set off, really, because there just isn't enough time to do all of them, and you want to do them well. Yeah, it's a kind of, I hope that doesn't sound like a fudgy answer. It's a sort of indefinable thing. The story has to grip you. The characters have to feel real and relatable. And I guess you're also looking for that other element of reading something at a time when you're sort of either in a zeitgeist where this story feels relevant, or you have to have a kind of sense that the wind is blowing in a certain direction and that this story is going to be relevant. And I don't know if it's some kind of magic, or maybe it is because of the name of our company, but we have had a lot of success at finding stories and developing them and then releasing them just at a moment when the world sort of needs a story like that. When we made The Cry, we were really early on in the discussions about coercive control. Subsequently, there were many series made and many documentaries made, which was great. The more stories, the better. But at the time that we adapted that novel, there weren't very many around, and yet somehow we just landed at the right time. When we made Mayflies for the BBC, which is a story, again, inspired by real life, but a piece of fiction inspired by, friends of the author who wrote that book. That's a story about two lifelong old friends, two guys who've known each other many, many years. One of them has a terminal cancer diagnosis, and he asks the other one to basically take him to Switzerland to end his own life because he wants to have dignity in dying. And again, when we adapted that piece, it literally transmitted right in the middle of a period when in the Scottish Parliament they were debating assisted suicide, and then subsequently that went on to be debated in the Westminster as well. And then, of course, with the Tattooist, which we started 6 years ago, we could never have envisaged the context in which that show would be released. So I don't know, like I'm hoping we can keep this up, because it's
Yeah.
it's really poignant, I think, when that happens. And I personally, I do get inspired by stories that are based on a degree of truth, that they're maybe inspired by real person's experiences or real events. And I do feel passionately that popular drama can be a force for, good and for change. And if I'm going to spend 6 years of my life or 4 years of my life developing something and battling to get it made, then I'm really invested in that being a piece of work that will move audiences and that will maybe make some difference. And by far the most rewarding outcomes of the dramas we make are the emails we get from people who have watched them and who've been personally affected by the subject matter, perhaps explored in the drama. That really touches me, because when someone takes the time to write to you and say, I watched your show, I know it's only fiction, but I am that character, I am in that position right now, that's really spine tingling. And so I'm always looking for those stories that might encapsulate all of those things. But at the end of the day, producers are gamblers, like we put money on this number rather than that number, and we hope that it comes in. But it's got to be sort of informed by something in your gut, I would say.
I wonder if there's like a Gamblers Anonymous for producers.
I'm sure there's a producers. In fact, there is an organisation called Producers Anonymous in the UK, of which I am a member. But it's a support group for each other, where we share stories and we help each other. But it certainly makes for an interesting life. That's for sure. It's not a safe and easy life, because there are so many other projects that never get made. And sometimes when I look back through our files, I've got like all my scripts on my iPad, and they're all in different folders, and I've got novels in there and treatments. So when I look back sometimes and I come across an idea from, oh, God knows how many years ago, you just think, oh, wow, think of all the energy that went into that,
Is it hard for you to let something go when you realize, you get to that point, you realize, I've worked on this a couple of years and I can't make this happen? Like, how do you make that shift to let something that you felt so passionately about sit on your iPad?
I'm really bad at that. If you ask anyone in my team, they'll tell you that when we have development meetings, they come around and they say, are we going to re-option this again? Really? Are we going to? And I say, yep, because we will get it away. We will get this one away. And there are some that we've had in option for, quite some time. And I can't let go of them, because I know that I'm coming to them. I know that we are going to get them away. Like, I really believe it. But everybody has different, we have a great development team, and I'm sure everyone in that team has other projects on the slate where they feel the same about those, So, and at the end of the day, there's only so much time available and there's only so many resources available. But I'm really bad at letting go of projects, is the truth. I should be better at it, but I'm not.
You're good. You're good. Now you have to keep that passion. I'm curious though, as a producer, and who's helping you keep that flame going in you as a producer to like carry those through, especially with something like the Tattooist of Auschwitz of, 6 years of your life and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I'm sure. And just that light can burn out so easily. But like, what just makes you get up and like, I'm going to do this and put everything into it no matter what, and somehow sleep and eat and get through the day?
I know. The great team of people around me, to be honest, although you can have an idea, you can have a passion to make something happen, producing is a team sport, like you can't do it without the collective efforts of so many people with such distinct abilities and talents. So with the Tattooist, I mean, it was such an ambitious project to take on. And I guess the other thing that is in the sort of kernel of what motivates me personally is the impossibility of it, which is a tricky way to be. But it's almost like when I see something that feels like it is impossible, then it sort of dares me in a way to try to do it. So I think the impossibility of it, in a strange way, is a motivating factor. The people around us in the team in Synchronicity, Jacqueline, our amazing writer who adapted the book and is singularly responsible for the idea of the structure of it, actually. And she's also a fellow exec on the project, and all the other people involved in that project as well. But I think more generally, my husband, who is also my partner in the business, he's like my support mechanism, and my dog, Terry, who they've both just gone out for a walk. But you need those sorts of people around you who will cheer you on when you feel like you're getting, when your battery level is getting really low. And certainly on the Tattooist, that, you know, I reached that many, many times because it is such an impossible challenge, you know, to even begin to tell Lally and Gita's story and to, you know, recreate Auschwitz, inverted commas, because of course you can't do that. All you can do is try to create a sense of that place that is relevant for his story, you know. Yeah, lots of different things, I think. But the truth of it is that I am incredibly driven, and I do find it hard to stop until I feel like I've done everything I can possibly do for that project. The challenge is just that there's so many great projects, you know, and they all take a lot of time, but I have to get better at saying no and giving up soon, maybe.
Don't we all?
And then maybe we need to find more people, because we've got such a great slate and we want to get all those projects made, you know. But
do you think about the international appeal? Like, have you done projects that the story would cut, the content and concept of the story takes place in the United States, or are you focused more on things that are happening in Europe? Like, you know, do you think about that international appeal when you're picking your projects?
Absolutely. I mean, what's most exciting for me is the idea that, you know, I can sit with a novel or a you know, the starting point for an idea, treatment or whatever, where I am, and that it will go on a journey. That idea will go on a journey and will eventually speak to and reach and move audiences all over the world. I think that's a real thrill, and it's been great to see that with the Tattooist. I think that we, as a company, we're drawn to projects from all over the world. And in fact, our next project, The Body, which is an adaptation of a Hanif Qureshi novella, and we made a little announcement about that in Deadline last week. But that project is all set in Sacramento, and it's grounded in the US, but from there it really goes to the world in a major way. That's my next big impossible project. We are very internationally focused. We have another project called Song of the Sun God, which is a co-production with Karen Radsner in Australia, and that's a Sri Lankan civil war epic. And we also have a project set in suburb of Glasgow amongst some socially economically deprived younger men, and investigating gang culture and knife crime, and that's sort of like a Scottish Gomorrah. So we have a slate that's very eclectic, I guess you would say, but the common theme through all of them is that they are about something significant, I think, you know. Gang culture with the case of the young team, immortality and narcissism and the desire to live forever with the body, really underexplored injustices of the Sri Lankan civil war with the other ones. As I say, we don't like to take an easy path, but it's always where does that idea, you know, what does it do to you inside? And I think that these days, you know, the streamers have given us all an appetite for seeing stories from all over the world, you know. As long as the themes are universal, they cut through, you know, and the characters feel real. It sort of gives you a thrill to see a story that has such a specific place, you know, and time of its setting. As long as everybody can understand that there are themes that are being explored. I mean, Baby Reindeer, for example, you know, is so specific and has, you know, blown up everywhere. So these days you have to make international drama because that's the nature of putting these projects together. But we would do it anyway because that's where our passion lies.
Have you ever thought about like what Lally would have thought of it, or does that weigh on you? Like, gosh, I hope he would have liked this. Like, are you thinking about that at all in the process, or do you have to kind of divorce yourself from that?
Knowing that the story is based on real people, you know, the descendants of whom are still alive, you know, are alive. Gary Sokolov, Lally and Gita's son, and his children, their grandchildren, you know, are here. They've seen the show. We actually screened the entire show to Gary in Melbourne in an advanced preview screening back in February. And that was the most special screening I've ever attended. I mean, I had seen those episodes, I don't know, 200 times, through the post-production process. But when I sat in that screening theatre in Melbourne with Gary and Heather Morris and two of Gary's childhood friends, that he's grown up with and who knew his mum and dad really, really well, it was like watching a show that someone else had made. It was like watching the show all over again, because I was sort of definitely having an outer body experience, because the reality of that and the responsibility of that really, hit home watching it with Gary and hearing him cry and laugh and, sob and cheer at different parts of the story was just like most incredible experience.
I can't imagine what that was like watching it with him.
It really was incredible. And I was nervous, obviously, myself and my fellow exec from Sky, Serena, we were both nervous of what the reaction would be. And also we wanted to do it in enough time before the series was transmitted to the world, right? Because we didn't want Gary to watch the show at the same time as everybody else. I felt that would be overwhelming and unfair. And so we felt we had a duty of care to him to let him see it so that he had time to absorb it before it was launched, and before everyone started writing about it. Thrilled to say that he absolutely loved it. I mean, he said this in interviews, and I might not get the quote exactly right, but he said something like, "You've given me back my father." And he was blown away by Harvey's performance. Harvey had studied the real Lally's video footage that Heather recorded back in 2003. And he had really very finely tuned his performance very subtly with a lot of the mannerisms of the man. And Gary saw that and appreciated that, and was really blown away by it. So I do think about what the real Lally would have thought. One of the things he said to Heather, when he was still with us and when they used to go to the cinema every week and they would fantasize about who would play, the real Lally and the real Gita in the movie as they thought it would be at that time. And he wanted Ryan Gosling or Brad Pitt at that point. But he said to Heather, as long as it's a good looking boy, I don't care, because I was a good looking boy, And I think he would have been thrilled with Jonah Hauer-King, who played so beautifully.
Incredible performance.
Yeah, truly. So I do feel like, Heather made a promise to Lally that she would spend her time getting that story out to the world. And then when she put her faith in us and we optioned the book from her, we took the baton of that responsibility on. So I feel that really keenly. And I know that everyone in the team, the whole team, the production team as well, the designers, every single person felt that. And at the very beginning of the process, we took everybody to the Auschwitz Museum. We spoke a lot about Lally and Gita and exactly that responsibility of depicting a story which is based on someone's real life and real experience. So I'm sure he would have had some things to say, because from what I know of him via Heather, he was a man who didn't hold back on his opinion, and and he liked to laugh, and he was a cheeky chappy, but he also, he was so brave and courageous to share his story when so many survivors don't feel that they can. So I think that's really inspiring, and I hope it, inspires other people to share whatever they feel they have to in their own lives. But yeah, he would have had an opinion, but at least we definitely cast some good looking boys, which is one of the things inspired.
I keep thinking about how long it takes for these stories to come out. Like, it's interesting that he decided to share it after Gita passed. And also that Heather was persistent enough. So he waits all this time, and then Heather was persistent enough to spend 11 years trying to get this book published.
Yeah.
And then you were persistent enough to spend all these years getting this made. I mean, it really is a miracle that some of these deeply personal, intense stories ever get out.
100%. I mean, because getting anything to the screen is, it's just like, I don't know, pushing boulders backwards up mountains, forever and ever and ever. And so many amazing stories never make it to the screen. And you do need grit as a producer, a writer, any sort of creative involved in this process. You need persistence. Again, it's that indefinable quality. There's just a certainty somehow in the material and in your response to the material, that you know that somehow this will happen. You can't always tell, what the road ahead will involve. And in the case of The Tattooist, obviously we had COVID in the middle, which was a complete curveball. You're often battling trends in the marketplace, broadcasters thinking audiences can't take difficult material, or maybe they don't want to push them in that direction when everyone is fighting for eyeballs. But I strongly believe the audience is so emotionally instinctive. They know when you are communicating a true emotionally grounded story to them. They can take whatever darkness you need to show, so long as it's truthful and so long as the emotional through line is there. I think they'll follow that story with you. I think we go to the cinema, we read novels, we watch television series in order to be moved, and that's the contract with us. I think that's our job, is to create an experience for audiences that makes them feel something. Ideally, that's their first response, is that it moves them, it makes them cry, it makes them feel joy, or fear, or any other of those emotions. But it also leaves them with a residue of understanding someone's experience in a more profound way than maybe they did at the beginning. I sometimes I wish I could switch it off. I mean, I have to be held back from going into bookshops by my husband and my team, because there just aren't enough hours in the day. But there's so
many.
There's so many great stories. Yeah, I know, it's quite a sad addiction, isn't it? Really, but
yeah.
But there are just so many great stories, and yeah, something gets under your skin, and you just make a commitment that you're not going to stop. With the case of mayflies, as part of our research, we met two men, a gay couple. One man was suffering from cancer and had a terminal diagnosis, and his partner. And they spoke to us. We did some research, and they very kindly spoke about their experience of going along the process of preparing to go to Switzerland. When people are generous enough to speak to you like that, and they tell you they give you their experience as part of your research for your fictional endeavour, it just sort of fuels you even more, because you understand the impact a story can have on people. So yeah, you just keep going. I mean, Heather is incredible. I mean, what she did is just
yeah.
I mean, she tried to write it as a screenplay initially, as you probably know. She didn't have any success with that, but in advertising it, as it were, for a Kickstarter campaign, a young editor found her and said, "This is a novel, like you should write this as a novel." But this was a woman. I think Melanie Linsky's portrayal of Heather in The Tattooist is so perfect and sublime, because that's who Heather was. I mean, she was in her early 50s. She wasn't a successful author. She was a complete novice. She wasn't a historian. She wasn't a teacher. She was kind-hearted, empathetic listener, and someone who was prepared to spend the time with this elderly man. And I think she went on a journey that even she couldn't have imagined,
Yeah.
But she just was driven by that promise that she made to him.
I had adopted a book called Slavery by Another Name about slavery post-Civil War. Very grim, dark. And so when I'm watching Heather and the way her character, I could completely relate to what it's like to take on a project that is just so intense, emotionally intense. And she did an incredible job demonstrating and showing how that impacted her personal life and her mindset, and it can be all consuming. And I would love at some point to talk to Heather, just from a novelist perspective, about how she adapted all of this. One of the things that I wanted to tell you that I really admired about your story and how you went about telling this story, we've seen so many stories about Auschwitz. Like, it's not like it's an unknown thing. So there's a part of that releases you from the responsibility of telling it all, because we kind of already know some of it. But you tell it from this perspective of like almost the birth of it. And Lolly is like, "Oh, I'm just going to go to work camp," like, I'm going to toughen up as a man, And the first time you show us the faces of people, just this boom, 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 and you realize, oh, they're dead. But we don't see the death. but
Yeah.
we know it. And you certainly show us plenty of death, but those moments were just, it's like it almost took your breath away every time you would see somebody's picture like that, because you knew what happened. And I really appreciated that. I thought that was beautifully done.
Wow. Well, I mean, the premise of the show really is that we are telling one man's experience. We're telling Lally's experience. So we're really very much in his point of view. And I'm glad that it feels like that to you, that you feel the dread of what we now know through history. We know what happened, but we want to put the audience in the shoes of that young man who volunteers to go in order to save his brother who has children, or his elderly father. And, you know, the real Lally Sokolov was a linguist. He spoke 5 or 6 different languages. He was charming. He was a real communicator. And so, you know, Heather says that when she spoke to Lally about this, you know, he felt that whatever it was, he felt that he was the person to go because of the members of his family. He would be able to deal with what was ahead, you know. And yet, obviously, as we see, you know, he didn't know fully just what would unfold there and how horrific it would be. But the intention is to make you feel like you are on that journey with him, because you are literally inside elderly Lally's head. You know, you're only seeing what you're seeing because he is sitting on a sofa in 2003 telling it to Heather Morris, and some of it is coming back in a fully formed memory. Some of it is not coming back exactly as it was because he doesn't want to go there yet in front of this woman that he doesn't yet know. And also he's not prepared to go all the way with some memories because he's ashamed of them. You know, he had this misplaced sense of shame and guilt on his shoulders because not only was he a survivor, but he was a survivor who survived by being a tattooist, which effectively made him an employee of the SS. I think that when you see those faces, Tally, our director, Tally Shalom-Ezer, that was very much a flair of Tally's to put those faces in there. They weren't in the scripts. That idea, I think, is real genius because it is meant to show you the faces of the people that haunt Lally in his head, you know, and all types of people, young people, old people, disabled people, who didn't make it whilst he did. So the faces are sort of an expression of his guilt and shame at having survived. And I think they're also an opportunity, when we break the fourth wall, they're sort of an opportunity to shake the audience awake a bit, you know, because when you watch period drama, I always think sometimes you can get very distanced from it because it's period drama. It doesn't affect us. You know, this is something in a time frame that doesn't relate to our experience. And yet there's something about those faces when they look directly at us in the audience that I hope challenge the audience to, you know, to understand the gravity of what happened and of the sorts of things that continue to happen, you know. So yeah, many people comment on those faces and the structure of the show and the storytelling style of the show. And these are all elements of the show that we worked, you know, together to make it distinctive. But the spark of the originality for those faces came from Tally, and the spark of the structure came from Jacqueline. And at the time, you know, there's a bit of, as there always is, you know, there was a bit of uncertainty with the commissioners as to whether or not this structure would work, you know. Would it feel jarring to be in the camp and then come to 2003 in Melbourne? You know, would that throw us out of both stories and ultimately make us not feel we were in either one? I feel with those non-linear stories that they are a challenge, but if you get the cut points right, you know, and if you cut between the past and the present in a very acutely timed way, that they can be really powerful. You know, they actually have the opposite effect. They make the audience concentrate more. They sort of pull you in rather than make you passive. And so I really fought to maintain that, because at one time there was discussion about, let's just adapt the story in the novel and that's it. But I felt, to your point at the beginning, I sort of felt like, well, we've seen that. Like, we need to make, if we're going to adapt this novel, there has to be something unique about it that we offer, because otherwise the novel should be left as a great novel. You know, I think when you make any screen adaptation, that's the first question you have to ask yourself. Should I really adapt this book? It is a great book, but what is it about it that we can bring to it that merits it being a screen adaptation? So in this case, I think, you know, the approach is really speaks for itself in that regard.
It allows you to touch, and I'm sorry, Sadie, I'm totally dominating this conversation.
Fine.
By going back and forth, it allows you to touch on that PTSD, that survivor's guilt, that all of that other layer of, yeah, this is what he did to survive. But then there was also another thing he had to do to survive once he got out, to survive having been through that. And
Absolutely.
maybe, I don't know if Heather ever asked him, but maybe he didn't want to tell the story when Gita was alive because he didn't want to put her through it all over again, like reliving it. Maybe it was like a way to protect her.
From what I know, via Heather, they had a pact, Lally and Gita, that if he survived her and she passed first, then she gave him her blessing for him to tell the story. She didn't really want to talk about it. They processed it in different ways and dealt with it in different ways, but he felt very strongly, and I think even more strongly when his wife passed, because he was grieving and he was a lonely guy, you know, who desperately missed his wife, and he wanted to talk about Gita. I mean, in episode 1, when he says to Heather, "This is a love story," he does mean it at that point, because he sets out wanting to talk about Gita, about how he met Gita and how amazing that he met Gita in that place. But of course, in order to honour their love story, he has to go through all these other horrible memories and these dreadful events, you know, to get to that story. And so, yeah, I totally agree. I think that we would have missed such complexity if we hadn't taken the path that we did, because we didn't want to make a piece that felt like a sort of over-commercialized kind of saccharine version of this experience. We wanted to show an audience that when the gates opened at the camp and when they were, inverted commas, liberated, because it wasn't really a liberation, you know, the women were sent on a terrible death march through Poland, and Lally and many other prisoners were recaptured and sent to other camps. We have this notion in fiction, don't we, that, you know, there's a happy ending, there's an easy ending, and that when they're released, that's that. But in fact, it was just the beginning of a whole other life sentence of trauma and PTSD. And, you know, when you watch any Shoah tapes, I think you watch any of the Shoah footage, any interviews, and indeed Lally's own interviews for the Shoah and his own interviews with Heather Morris, you know, he will be laughing 1 minute, talking about a memory, and then he will break down a split second later, because even though he was in his late 80s, these characters and these people that he had met and who sadly hadn't made it, and his tormentor, Beretsky, you know, they were still very much alive in his everyday life and world. And the way that we dramatise that is obviously an attempt to try to give the audience a sense of that. So yeah, I think it's important to show the Holocaust survivors' experience, and even more so because in a few years' time there will be no survivors left, and so you know, how will we depict that again? You know,
there was a woman who used to come to our motel every summer, and she was an Auschwitz survivor, and this was many years ago, and it took her, I think, maybe 10 years of coming to us to tell me that, but she's like, and I won't talk about it. Like she just was like, I can't talk about it. And I don't know what made her say it that one day, but it is, I don't know if she's still with us or not, but you're right. These people, these stories need to be told, and especially right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, in our cast, you know, we had many Jewish actors with direct connection to Auschwitz. In fact, many who were second and third generation survivors. One of our actors, Millie Eshet, her grandmother is a Holocaust survivor and actually an Auschwitz survivor, and has never ever spoken about it to Millie. And even after Millie appeared in the drama, and went to her grandmother and said, "Okay, you know, now you can talk to me about it," she still won't speak to her about it. So I know. I mean, and I guess it's just unparalleled trauma, isn't it? And if people speak about it, they don't know what that may lead to. And yet for other people, speaking about it is important. So yeah, we had so many people with connections to the material. David Katz-Nelson, the cinematographer, his father is a survivor and is alive. He wasn't at Auschwitz, but he survived. And Tally's grandfather lost his entire family, his first family at Auschwitz. We had lots of people within the team that we were able to, you know, hold on to and say, you know, is this respectful? Are we getting the right tone here? Because tone was the most, I think, the thing we talked about the most everywhere, you know, the tone of the writing, the tone of the performances, the tone of music, tone of graphics, everything was to do with tone. I'm very grateful for the personal contributions that many members of the team made about that. I mean, David would literally say to Tally and I, you know, yeah, I would be happy to let my father see that, or no, I wouldn't be happy to let my father see that, because this is a real experience we're, you know, attempting to depict. So it's kind of fascinating and tragic to think of all that trauma trapped in people, you know, that can't share it.
Yeah. I'm curious with shooting this, you know, and during, you know, the days of filming and having a team that is so very connected to that material and the history of it, you know, for you as a producer and even your team, I don't know, did you kind of just try to build people up in the day and kind of bring them back to like reality after like final cut, like final shot, and like, okay, like let's be happy, let's have some joy, because it's such a heavy thing. And I just, I don't know, as a filmmaker, I just feel like I'd be so bogged down by the weight of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was tough in so many ways. We created a set that was a physical set, you know, that was a portion of Birkenau, and we had a green screen set up around about that set, so we could project in post-production. You know, we knew we would be doing lots of visual effects to create the scale of the camp, but nonetheless, the practical set was really big. I mean, it was so big you could see it on Google Satellite. And so we were filming in that space for weeks and weeks and weeks. And that was really heavy, you know, and you're surrounded by extras who are dressed in the costumes and depicting scenes, many of which are really distressing. So, you know, we knew from the outset that we would need therapists on hand. We had mental health counsellors on hand for everyone to speak to as and when they felt they needed it. They came to visit set actually once and did some sessions on set as well. But there was a bond between everybody. I think the adversity of it actually bonded everyone in a strange way. And there was also a sort of unspoken stoicism that, however hard it was, you know, these are first world problems for a production crew to experience, because, you know, they pale into insignificance against the story we're depicting. So people were very grown up about that, actually. You know, we had a number of HODs from the UK and internationally living in Slovakia alongside the Slovakian team. The Slovakian team were incredibly hospitable, you know, and they can certainly drink even more than the Scots can. So I think we definitely used a bit of alcohol at the weekends to balance out the trauma. And, you know, people just generally looked out for each other. It was tough. It was really physically demanding as well, long days and, you know, hard material. But then again, you know, you would have moments of just pure joy when you would realise, you would remember, you know, you start to forget that although you're making a drama, it's based on something real that exists in a real person's story. And then you'd have those moments where it would just suddenly hit you. And those were very rewarding moments, I think, for all of us. But yes, we definitely were looked after by our Slovakian teammates who made sure we were out at the weekends and doing a mixture of rest and entertainment.
The one question I'd love to know is, what do you hope people take away from this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I hope that people get to the end of the show and that they are moved, that they have been moved in a really significant way by the telling of one man's experience, and in a way that makes them I don't know, I guess sort of go back out into the world and be a bit more empathetic and a bit more compassionate and a bit more aware of actions and consequences and the dangers of intolerance, the dangers of anti-Semitism. Because in my view, I find it really hard to understand why we can't just tolerate each other and appreciate each other. So the book had such a huge effect globally. Sales, I believe, are well in excess of 13 million now. And I'm told by the publishers that book tie-ins increase book sales by 60 to 70%.
Wow.
So maybe 20 million people have bought this book, which means if there's more than one person in the household that have read the book, then maybe 30, 40 million people have read this book. And these are not people necessarily that you would expect would read a book about the Holocaust. You know, many of them are people who don't typically read novels, let alone historical fiction like this. And what I hope with the television drama is that we can also reach audiences that wouldn't normally come to this material. I really hope and pray that the Jewish community appreciate the show when they feel it's respectful and appropriate, because that was a big concern of ours. I think one of the great phenomenons of this piece is that we have the opportunity to reach a global audience, like a really big audience. And so with a show like this, you know, we're not preaching to the converted, if you see what I mean. Like, we want to reach people, maybe even people with what we might all feel would be objectionable views, you know, to sort of make them stop for a minute and understand, you know, what occurred there. Because when I was setting out to develop the project in the very early days, and I did a bit of research into Holocaust awareness, I assumed that people had a general knowledge of the Holocaust. When I was at school, it was certainly part of our curriculum, but I was horrified to find just the extent of the ignorance out there about the Holocaust and the fact that it even happened. We're not making a documentary. We're not making as I say, the definitive drama of the Holocaust. Not at all. It's just one story. But I do hope that it just makes people stop and think and talk, because they've been moved. And if you can move people, then I think you can get them to think about their position on things.
Yeah.
Long-winded answer, sorry.
You have done a stunning job, and I think that you will achieve your goal for sure.
Absolutely.
It was an honor,
so.
To watch it.
Wow, thank you so much. Gosh, that's given me goosebumps. That's the thing, isn't it? If one person watches it and says, God, you should watch this because it's amazing, it made me cry, it made me laugh, and what these people went through, then, you know, that creates a contagion in a good way, I think, and will make people, as I say, just have a bit more compassion for each other, really.
Yeah. We need more empathy in the world, and this show is definitely timely for that as a learning lesson for all.
For sure.
And we will sing it loud and proud.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for taking the time to have a chat. I don't get a lot of opportunity to reflect on what I do because I'm just so busy doing it.
Yeah.
Sort of in a forward motion. I very rarely stop and kind of think about, oh yeah, why do I do it? And
what did I do?
It's quite nice to have an opportunity to pause for a minute. And thank you.
Anytime.
We're thrilled that we got you at this stage too, like at the end of the chaos, and so that you could take that time and just breathe a little bit and spend some time just casually chatting about it.
Whatever you have next, whatever you're doing, your team across the board, Synchronicity, you guys have a home with Reckless and Script, and I'm sure Pipeline too. So
yep.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd love to talk to you guys again.
Yeah, we would love that. Are you able to just read a book for pleasure?
It's a real challenge. I've got so many books that I've got to read that have been piling up that I know I have to take them with me, but I still end up going into the bookshop, you know, at the airport, and I find something just that calls to me. It's a weird thing. It really is. These books just somehow jump out, and you'd be surprised the number of times, I don't know, that I find a book and there's just some weird connection to it at that particular moment that resonates for some reason, you know, with events that are going on in the world. I don't know, maybe I should start reading tea leaves or reading the tarot or something. But
Reckless Creatives is a Pipeline Artist original podcast. Like, subscribe, and follow us on social media at Pipeline Artists, and find more info at pipelineartists.com/listen. Until next time, stay reckless.